Okay, let's unpack this. In today's relentless news cycle, it's remarkably easy to just get lost in the sheer volume of information, right? Especially when it comes to internal party dynamics. But every now and then, a seemingly local event cuts right through the noise, and it reveals much bigger questions about power, structure, and who truly holds the reins within a major political organization. Today, we're taking a deep dive into just such a flashpoint. It's happening within the Florida Republican Party, specifically down in Brevard County. It's a dispute that has ignited this fascinating tension between local and state authority. Our mission here is to lay out the specific events that sparked this conflict, try to understand the compelling arguments coming from both sides, and explore the foundational legal and constitutional principles involved. We've gathered the relevant news reports and a pretty detailed analysis concerning Brevard County's authority to help us unpack this together.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how these seemingly localized disputes can really illuminate these intricate layers of governance. And they reveal fundamental disagreements on how rules should even be interpreted. This isn't just about one incident or, one individual. It's like a real-time case study in how political parties function at their core, where ultimate power truly resides, and, well, what happens when those layers of authority just clash?
You've highlighted the stakes perfectly. To understand how these layers clash, we first need to get clear on the core event, the thing that ignited this whole debate. So what exactly went down in Brevard County on July 28, 2025?
Right.
On that day, the local party arm, the Brevard Republican Executive Committee, they call it BRS, held what turned out to be a truly pivotal meeting. What unfolded was a pretty decisive vote. 110-14.
Yeah, that's quite a margin.
It is. And the vote was to remove U.S. Representative Randy Fine from his position as their state committeeman. Now, the reasons BSE cited were quite direct. Repeated unexcused absences and failure to perform official duties as outlined in party rules. Pretty straightforward stuff. And it's important to understand Randy Fine's unique position here. He's currently the U.S. representative for Florida's 6th Congressional District, which notably includes Daytona Beach, but not Brevard County.
Right, that's a key detail. He's not their congressman.
Exactly. Yet he was elected Brevard County State Committeeman back in August 2024. Won it with 64.07% of the vote. Significant support then. So you have this federal representative elected to a local party role, now facing removal by that same local committee.
And that's where the role of state committeemen becomes so central to this whole discussion. It's an elected position, unpaid, a party leadership role. And it serves as this vital bridge, you see, connecting the county-level party organization directly with the state party. So imagine being that crucial link, making sure local voices get heard further up the chain.
Okay, so it's an important link. What happens if he is removed from this specific role?
Well, if he's removed from this role, a special election would have to be held to fill the post. But, and this is another key detail, Randy Fine would still remain a voting member of the Florida Republican State Committee.
How so?
Because all Republican members of Congress automatically hold that position. It's separate from being the county's elected state committeeman.
Okay, so layers upon layers.
Exactly. So you have Rick Lacey, he's the chairman of BS, leading this effort to remove Fine, citing these, specific performance issues. And then on the other side, you've got Bill Helmich, the executive director of the Republican Party of Florida, the RPOF. And he has clearly pushed back against Brevard's move.
That sets the stage perfectly. So, with that decisive vote, 110-14, and Fine's unique position, the obvious next question is, on what grounds does Brevard believe it actually has the authority to make such a significant move? What specific failures was Chairman Rick Lacey pointing to? Well, Lacey didn't really pull any punches. He specified that Fine missed at least 5 consecutive regular BRE meetings without providing valid excused absences. That's pretty concrete.
5 consecutive meetings, yeah, that sounds like a clear violation of typical attendance rules.
Right. And beyond just attendance, he cited Fine's failure to fulfill core responsibilities. Things like acting as a liaison between the state and county party, supporting party-building efforts in collaboration with party leadership, and sharing relevant communications and resources with the local committee members.
So not just showing up, but actually doing the job they elected him for.
Exactly. These aren't minor complaints. They clearly outline a series of alleged performance issues that Brevard is taking very seriously.
And this is where it gets really interesting, looking at the legal and procedural foundations BREC is citing. They assert their authority comes from multiple, pretty powerful layers, starting right at the top with Florida Statutes, particularly the chapter that governs political parties, Chapter 103.
Okay, so state law itself.
Yes. Florida law seems quite clear on this. Section 103.091, subsection 1, it essentially empowers county executive committees to set their own rules for local party governance. That fundamentally includes how they choose and, crucially, how they remove their own representatives to higher bodies, like the state committee.
So the power to choose implies the power to remove.
It seems strongly implied, especially when coupled with subsection 4 of that same statute. It explicitly grants county committees the power to fill vacancies within their own membership. Think about it. When a county committee removes someone for cause, like BREC did here, it naturally creates a vacancy which that statute says they have the power to fill.
That makes sense. Remove creates vacancy, they fill vacancy.
Precisely. This statutory structure seems to establish county committees as the foundational units of the state party, giving them, well, surprising autonomy in selecting and, by extension, removing their representatives for cause like violations or non-performance.
Okay, so that's the state law argument. What else?
Well, beyond state law, we also look at the Republican Party of Florida's own bylaws. Now, like most state parties, the RPOF generally operates under a strong principle of local autonomy. This means they delegate significant authority to county executive committees for local party governance. Things like selection and discipline of their own officers and representatives.
Discipline being the key word here.
Right. Standard RPOF bylaws, and the county REC bylaws usually modeled on them, include clear provisions for removal for cause. These allow for members, including state committeemen, to be removed for specific issues violating party rules, failing attendance requirements, failing core duties, or engaging in conduct detrimental to the party. All things alleged here.
And who initiates that removal process?
That's the crucial part. What's really insightful is that the removal process for a state committeeman elected by the county committee typically originates within and is decided by that same county committee. That overwhelming 110-14 vote by BREC, it looks like a powerful exercise of this delegated authority, suggesting they follow their own internal procedures rigorously. The RPOF bylaws would generally outline the process bureaus must follow. Things like notice, maybe a hearing, a certain vote threshold, but they rarely grant the state committee the power to just unilaterally override a locally elected official's removal.
So the state sets the how, but the county does the what and who.
Generally, yes, for locally elected positions like this. And then there's a final, powerful basis. The constitutional basis, the First Amendment's freedom of association.
How does that apply internally to a party?
Well, this fundamental right protects the ability of political parties to organize themselves, select their leaders, their representatives, free from undue government interference. But crucially, courts have recognized this right extends internally. It protects the ability of local party units, like BREC, to govern their own affairs and choose their own representatives. So Brevard's action, removing fine, can be seen as an exercise of this core associational right of its members. And any attempt by the RPOF to simply override this local decision could arguably be seen as infringing on the associational rights of those local BREC members.
Wow. Okay, that's a very robust picture of Brevard's position, state law, party bylaws, even the First Amendment. It seems pretty layered. But as you hinted earlier, there's always another side in these kinds of power struggles. And the Republican Party of Florida, the RPOF, has indeed pushed back, creating a direct conflict here. How are they framing their counterargument? Well, their executive director, Bill Helmich, made their stance crystal clear. He stated, and I'm quoting, "The Brevard County Republican Party is mistaken in its interpretation of its authority under the RPOF rules."
Okay, mistaken. That's direct.
Very. He continues, "RPOF rules do not allow a county Republican Party to remove a sitting state committeeman. State committeeman Randy Fine remains in good standing." Come. Okay. So that's a direct, flat-out denial of Brevard's authority. In response, we know BREC Chairman Rick Lacey plans to request a formal ruling from the Florida Republican Party Chairman Evan Power on Fine's eligibility.
Yeah, this really crystallizes the conflict, doesn't it? It raises that important question. Is the RPOF just saying BREC misinterpreted its own local bylaws, or is there a more fundamental disagreement here? A disagreement about the actual scope of authority granted to county committees versus the state party itself?
What do you think?
Well, when the RPOF, through Helmich, explicitly states that county parties do not have the power to remove a sitting state committeeman, that sounds like a fundamental disagreement on scope. It directly conflicts with Brevard's position, which, as we just laid out, is rooted in state statutes, the principles of local autonomy likely in RPOF's own bylaws, and even those constitutional associational rights. Now, the sources we have don't detail the RPOF's precise legal counterarguments with the same granularity as Brevard's, but their stance implies a very different philosophy.
Like what kind of philosophy?
Perhaps they view the state committeeman role as primarily a state-level position, even though it's locally elected, maybe they feel it needs consistent state control for party unity and coherence across Florida. It could be about ensuring statewide consistency, maybe preventing a patchwork of different standards or actions county by county, even if that means overriding a local decision in a specific instance to maintain that top-down organizational structure.
So control versus autonomy.
Exactly. This isn't just a slight misunderstanding of a rule. It highlights two directly opposing viewpoints on how all these layers, state statutes, RPOF bylaws, local bylaws interact, and ultimately who gets the final say.
Right. So let's game this out a bit. If the RPOF were to actively try and prevent this removal, effectively blocking BREC's clear 110-14 vote, what potential legal or constitutional issues might come up? Our sources seem to lay out some pretty clear scenarios where the RPOF could be seen as overreaching its authority.
Indeed. The analysis suggests several ways this could happen. One way the RPOF might overreach is by simply refusing to certify or recognize the removal without a valid reason. If BREC followed all its local procedures and the RPOF just refuses to accept the resolution and certify the vacancy, that looks like an overstep.
Because their role is just administrative at that point.
Typically, yes. Their role is usually to record the decision made by the electing body, in this case, BREC, and then facilitate the election of a replacement. Refusing certification without a clear, compelling reason, like maybe a fundamental violation of state party procedures by BREC, would seem to exceed its authority. It would be substituting the state committee's judgment for the local committees.
Okay, what's another potential overreach?
Another way would be attempting to actually overturn the removal decision itself. Imagine if the RPOF State Executive Committee, the SEC, were to vote to reinstate Randy Fine or just nullify BREC's removal vote entirely. That would seem to directly violate the principle of local autonomy we talked about, the one enshrined in Florida statutes and likely the party's own structure.
Because the state bylaws probably don't give them that power.
Generally, no. State party bylaws usually don't grant the state executive committee the power to act like an appellate court, overturning a local committee's decision like this, especially one made overwhelmingly and based on specified grounds like attendance and duties. That would seem to be an act beyond their legal power.
Makes sense.
What else? A third potential overreach involves imposing stricter standards or procedures than required. So if the RPOF suddenly demanded BREC follow removal procedures that are stricter than what's already outlined in RPOF's own bylaws or Florida law, or if they just invented new requirements after the fact, that could also be seen as exceeding RPOF's authority.
Like changing the goalpost after the game.
Kind of. The RPOF sets minimum statewide standards, sure, but it generally can't impose additional burdens on local committees beyond what the statutes or its own bylaws already stipulate, especially not to invalidate a local action already taken in good faith. And finally, there's the idea of bypassing the BREC in disciplinary matters. If the RPOF were to initiate its own disciplinary proceedings against Randy Fine as state committeeman regarding matters that clearly fall under BREC's purview, like his attendance at BREC meetings or local rule violations without first deferring to or working through BREC, that would also look like an overreach.
So respecting jurisdiction, basically.
Exactly. While the RPOF can discipline members for actions affecting the statewide party, it generally should respect the primary jurisdiction of the local committee over the conduct of its own representative in their local capacity.
Okay, so those are the ways they could overreach. If any of those scenarios actually play out, what are the specific constitutional and statutory violations the RPOF might be committing by trying to block this?
Well, first and foremost, circling back to what we discussed earlier, there's the First Amendment's freedom of association. By overriding BREC's decision on their chosen representative, the RPOF could arguably infringe upon the associational rights of those local BREC's members. They have a protected right to choose their representatives and govern their internal affairs, right? Including removing an officer for cause.
And courts protect that internal stuff.
Courts have consistently protected the internal autonomy of local party units against state party overreach in representative selection. They see these local units as fundamental building blocks of the party. State party interference could burden that freedom without, potentially, sufficient justification.
Okay, First Amendment, what else? Statutory violations.
Second, yes, the RPOF could be violating Florida statutes, specifically Chapter 103. By refusing to recognize BREC's removal and declaration of a vacancy, or by trying to reinstate fine, the RPOF would seem to be directly violating the statutory scheme, Section 103.091, that empowers county committees to govern their own membership and fill vacancies. Such an action would appear to run contrary to the legislative intent behind Chapter 103, which clearly establishes county committees as the primary building blocks of the Florida party system, vested with significant local control.
And third, you mentioned their own rules earlier.
And third, yes, quite significantly, the RPOF would likely be violating its own bylaws. As we discussed, RPOF bylaws almost certainly recognize county committees as the electing body for state committeemen and likely outline procedures for removal initiated and decided at the county level. They generally do not grant the state executive committee the power to unilaterally overturn a local removal decision made according to those procedures. So acting contrary to these provisions would mean the RPOF is violating its own governing rules. That could significantly undermine its legitimacy and internal consistency, you'd think.
This is truly a layered conflict, isn't it? With really deep implications. So let's bring it back out. Why should you listening right now care about what seems like an internal dispute between a county and a state party committee? What's the relevance? I mean, we're talking about more than just internal party squabbling here, right? This isn't just theory. It's a live case study in how power is distributed, how it's contested within any large political organization. It impacts representation, accountability, and ultimately how effective our political structures really are. It illustrates that power doesn't just flow neatly from the top down, it's often fiercely defended at the local level. And the principles at play here, they resonate far beyond Florida.
Precisely. That principle of local party control over the selection and removal of their own representatives, it's a cornerstone of the Florida political party system, as laid out in law. And it's protected as an associational freedom under the Constitution. Understanding these internal mechanisms helps you grasp the nuances of political organization far beyond just the headlines you might read about a particular vote or personality clash. And the outcome here, it could absolutely set a significant precedent for future interactions between local and state party bodies, not just in Florida, but potentially elsewhere too. It just highlights that constant inherent tension between centralization and localized self-governance within any large structure.
Yeah. This deep dive has really shown us how deeply interwoven statutory law, party bylaws, and constitutional freedoms are. They're in the very fabric of even seemingly local political actions. You get this clear, undeniable local vote on one side, 110 to 14 is hard to ignore, and then you have the state party's differing interpretation of the rules on the other. It's shaping up to be a fundamental test of where ultimate authority really lies within these complex structures.
Which really raises that important question, doesn't it? In any large organization, could be a political party, could be a corporation, even a civic group, where should the ultimate authority truly lie? Should it be at the foundational local level where the members are most directly engaged? Or should it be with the broader, centralized leadership that oversees the whole operation? And, maybe more importantly, what happens when those two very different ideas of power collide head-on? Forcing a showdown that could redefine the very rules of engagement for everyone involved, it's definitely something worth considering how these principles might apply in other organizations or areas of life you encounter.